Well, good evening. Good evening. I'm Larry Souter, and welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. We're coming to you from Bixler Chapel at the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us on the internet. Some of you are listening on the radio or watching on Roku, so we're glad for that and also for this live audience. Our theme scripture comes from Romans 8:38 through 39. I am sure that nothing can separate us from God's love, not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present or the future, and not powers above or powers below. Nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord. Tonight's guest is Mary Craig. She's one of our fellow members here at Madison. Mary says, I stuffed everything and memories inside of me for 41 years. Then I found myself in Nashville in a spouse abuse agency and crying for help. I knew something was not right. I needed help. Why did I always get in relationships with abusive men? Why didn't I think much of myself? Why couldn't I learn like ordinary people? Mary's childhood was split between two households. In one home, men dominated, women were objects of pleasure, and drugs and alcohol was plentiful. The other home was alcohol-free, where a financially struggling single mother tried to teach her children about Jesus and right from wrong. But unfortunately, her mother later admitted that she did not know how to be a mother. We'll take this break, and then when we come back, you'll meet Mary Craig.
Through my 5 years on the streets, God was always there, or I wouldn't be sitting here tonight. And my message has been since then, and always will be, you are never too far gone for God. You may be too far gone for family. You may be too far gone for man. But you are never, ever too far gone for God.
A devil's advocate over here. Hey, we got computers, we got cell phones. Why in the world do we need shortwave radio? Who listens to shortwave radio anymore? Before you answer that, let me show you a picture and show you a graphic.
All right.
Number of radios. 3 billion shortwave radios in the world. Is that correct?
That's
as far
correct.
As you know?
Yeah.
1 billion shortwave radios are turned on at any given time, right?
That's right.
3 people on the average are listening to each radio.
Right.
Getting ready to hump. And that would be one dead deer.
And please make welcome Mary Craig. Thank you for being with us. You're one of my members here at Madison, and you have a very compelling story to share with us tonight. I guess my first question is, why do you want to share this story? I've heard some aspects of it, and it's touching.
It's kind of to educate people and maybe help somebody else.
Sure, and we hope it does. You gave me several pictures, and I'm just going to, with your permission, just go through these, and you can identify the people in the photos, and then after that we'll talk about your story.
Yeah.
Let's look at number 1 here. This is you as a baby, right?
That is my uncle holding me and his wife and my grandfather and my dad.
All right, number 2 here is you,
Yeah,
young
that's
girl?
me as a little girl.
What age is this?
I'd say probably about 6.
6, sure. And the next one here? Birthday cake, it looks like.
Yeah, that's my aunt that had a big part to do in my life, and she made me that cake. It's a Care Bear cake because I was into Care Bears.
Where were you living during this time?
In Illinois.
In Illinois, okay. And the next one?
And that is my grandparents and me.
All right, next.
And that is my dad and one of his co-workers.
And which is the dad?
My dad is the one with his leg up.
Okay. And the next one here?
That is my mom in the middle, me, and then my brother, my youngest brother.
This is David?
Yes.
Okay. And the last one here?
That's a whole family photo of some of the family.
And this is your father's side of the family?
Yes.
Okay. Well, tell me about your family background a little bit.
I come from a very torn family that was very difficult as a child to know right from wrong. On my dad's side of the family, it was male-dominated and a lot of wrongdoing. I'd say where males did not respect females at all. It was more of a pleasure thing than it was about being with a woman for the right reasons. And then being with my mom, which I was not with my mom a whole lot, unfortunately, but she did play a very important part in me becoming who I am now, because she taught me about Jesus and two other ladies from church. And they were very important in my life, teaching me about Jesus, and they taught me right from wrong. And I am very thankful for that, because I've become a better person because of them.
At what age did your parents marry?
I was,
How old
well,
were they?
they were 17 and 18.
17, 18. And this was in Illinois or
They married in Richmond,
in
Virginia.
Virginia? Okay.
I was born in Richmond,
You
and
were
then
born in
my
Richmond.
brother came along a year after they were divorced.
Oh, I see. Okay. How were
I-
your mother and father different, or were they the same personality-wise?
Oh, they were very different. My father was a rolling stone, as you could say. Wherever you lay your head, was your home. Well, that was my father.
Right.
And then my mother was a very kind, sweet, caring, sensitive person who cared about others and would give her clothes off her back for anybody who would give her last dime to help somebody.
How were her mother skills?
Not very good. She did the best she could.
And that affected you, I assume.
Yes, it did, because I ended up doing the same thing to my kids, where I was not a very good mother.
I think Joanne Westerfield compiled several notes. I may have to refer to those once in a while. I've got, in big type, 7 pages printed out here about your life. So forgive me if I look down here sometimes.
That's okay.
Because your life goes all over the place.
Yeah, it
Not that
does.
that's necessarily bad. It's just kind of hard to follow sometimes. Your mother and aunt were placed with some adoptive parents. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me about that situation.
My adopted grandmother was a doctor who got her medicine license revoked in 3 different states. I know Illinois was one of them, Louisiana, and somewhere else. I don't remember the other one. I think it was Richmond.
But that wasn't a good situation.
No, because my adopted grandmother was selling drugs to the kids that were in the towns that she practiced in. So she sold drugs illegally to teenagers. And then her husband abused my mom and her sister and treated them more like servants than like children.
Really?
And from what I understand, molested them as well.
And this woman was a physician, and she used
She used medicine to her benefit.
and she used the girls in her housekeeping and chores and
Yes.
whatnot. Okay. And she was dispensing narcotics to various
Yes.
people, including your father?
Yes. My father was a heroin addict.
Really?
And my other aunts and uncles, they experimented with drugs, but they never got hooked on drugs, except my uncle did for a short time. And my uncle did lived with me and my father, my stepbrothers and stepmom.
Your mother and father divorced,
Yes, when I was 3.
and you stayed with your grandfather?
I stayed with various family members.
Okay.
I was tossed around quite a bit as a young child. It was whoever had time or whoever was available that particular day got me. So it was kind of like a toss of a dime.
And your grandfather, what I read in some notes here, he sexually abused his daughters. Is that
Yes,
right?
he was very perverted.
I would say so, yes. And there's a story of the grandfather coming down the hallway when you were staying in the house in bed.
Yes, when I lived in the house, I never understood why my aunt kept our bedroom door, because we shared the bedroom together. And I never understood why she kept the bedroom door locked until I got older and I started understanding things. But one evening, he tried to come in the bedroom, and she wouldn't let him in. And my uncle came through the door, through the front door, because he was coming from hanging out somewhere. And him and my grandfather just started having a fist fight there in the living room. And I was trying to help my aunt, and I went in the kitchen where my grandmother was, and she said, "No, you need to stay in here." And I guess she didn't want me to help my aunt, or she didn't want me to know what was going on.
Did your grandfather ever sexually abuse you?
No, he never had the opportunity.
The aunt was
He
a good,
would have
the
if-
aunt was a good person
Yes.
in this regard in preventing that from happening.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your father a little bit and some strippers in his life.
Yeah. He married a stripper. He divorced her, took one to Houston with him, proposed to her. She turned him down. But the one that turned him down was actually one of them that I actually got along with. And she was very nice to me compared to the other ones. I remember
There were two strippers.
Yeah. I remember times where he would have my babysitters come over, and they were strippers or streetwalkers, and they'd sit there and play with my toys in a non-childlike way. And
Now, your
I-
father played with you also with Barbie dolls, but
Yes.
that was a loving situation. Is that correct?
I don't know if it was so loving or not.
Ah,
I
see.
don't know if there was a reason behind it.
I see. I got the impression that maybe he was the good guy in this in regards to his relationship with you, but not necessarily the case.
I can't really say what my father's agenda was with me, but I do know that he did love me and he tried his best to be a good father,
Right.
but he was trying to overcome some demons that were a big part of his life.
Did you want to leave that situation at any time when you were growing up? Did you?
I didn't really understand it. I remember hiding a lot as a young child and not really feeling safe or comfortable in the situation. But I had a lot of aunts that would come and get me from the house and take me just to go and do kid-friendly things, take me to the park, play with me, take me to their house, just anything that they could to get me out of the situation. And they take me for days on end until I had to go to school or something.
Mm-hmm. Now, there were two strippers in the relationship with your father.
Yeah.
The second stripper brought 5 sons to
That was the first stripper.
the first one, to the relationship. And tell me about that story.
She brought the 5 boys into the marriage, and my stepmother and my stepbrothers all abused me physically, emotionally, and mentally. And two of my older stepbrothers molested me quite a bit growing up. I don't know if they understood what they were doing or not, but they did, and they had one of the neighborhood boys that would come over and do it as well. So that was a part of my life that I did not enjoy. And I also remember when I lived with my dad in that house that he was growing marijuana in the basement.
And also injecting narcotics in
Yes.
himself and others?
I don't know if he was injecting others, but I know that a lot of my babysitters were high as well.
Well, during this time, you had some medical problems with your hip. What age was that, and what were the problems?
I was diagnosed, I'd probably say around 4 or 5, and when I was probably about 6 or 7 is when they put a body cast on me at first for 6 months, and then a body brace for 6 months. After they did a surgery, which they did to fix my hip sockets to keep them in place to where I could walk.
It was a cast that kept the legs apart somehow, or?
They kept the legs apart, and they had a bar that was down like towards the middle,
Right.
and then one down at the bottom.
And that was called hip dysplasia?
Yes.
Okay. Well, during this time, you saw a counselor, I guess to try to get some relief from the bad family situation. And what I read, that you were somewhat obsessive with cleanliness.
Yes. And I later found out from counseling when I got help about 8 years ago, she told me that was part of a way for me to clean myself and keep from what happened to me out somehow.
Didn't work though, did it?
No.
No. Well, let's go back to your mother a little bit. Her mothering skills were not the best, and I think it even said in the notes here that she had some mild retardation.
My grandmother did.
Grandmother,
her mom.
not your mother.
No.
Grandmother, I'm sorry.
Well, my mother was diagnosed with mild mental retardation.
Okay.
And her mother was a little more severe than her.
I see. And she was, or one of the women in your family was jealous of you?
My stepmom and my mother both.
Why?
And my mother finally told me it's because I was always able to persevere and that I didn't let too much get in my way, that if I was determined to get something, I was going to go after it and do it, where she was not able to do that.
With the counselor, how long did that last? Not each session, but how long over a period of time did that last?
I went as a young child when I lived with my mother. She got me counseling. And that went on for maybe a year or two. And then about 8 years ago, when I got out of my last abusive relationship, I had finally started getting counseling through several different agencies. Some of it was done here at this church, and some was done at another agency. And I had to learn about who I was and figure out what I was about, because that was something I had never had a chance to do, because it was always somebody else in my life that I had to focus on. So for the first time in my life, I actually took time to focus on me. And it's helped me out a lot. And then I got to know the ladies at this church, and they have been such a wonderful support system for me.
This has been a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Your mother maybe was no help, and when I think it said in some notes here that you tried to talk to her about boys. about sex, about intimacy.
My
But she
mother,
didn't communicate.
my mother was taboo about that stuff. She did not want to talk to her daughter about that. A lot of the stuff that I learned either from other girls at school, or I learned from my aunts because I went to them, or to my grandmother.
Could have been so different, couldn't it?
Yes, but it was not, and I'm very thankful that I got out of it the way that I did, because I could have turned out a lot worse. But the Lord didn't want me to go down that road, so He kept me on a better path. He sent people in my life in various stages of my life, various times of my life, to help me through the path. And I didn't always pick the best choices of people to hang around all the time. So 8 years ago, when I finally started to seek help, I had to realize that I had to get all the negative people out of my life and get positive people in my life.
Why do you think you were drawn towards abusive men?
Because I saw it growing up. It was a pattern. And I learned that when I went to counseling, that it was a pattern. And a lot of the time when females pick abusive men, it's because they see it when they grow up. So it's kind of familiar territory. And even though they don't like it, and some of them might not understand it, they still allow it to happen because that's familiar territory.
You had a child. You discovered that you were pregnant, and you were thinking about giving the child up.
Yes,
Tell me that situation.
I had the adoptive parents already lined up. They were a military family, and because I come from a long line of military family members, I thought military would give him the best life.
Some structure, I guess.
Yes.
Yes.
And at the last minute after I gave birth to him, the nurses asked me if I wanted to hold him. And I said yes, and that was it after that. And that's when I started asking the nurses what kind of help there was out there for single unwed mothers that didn't really have resources. And I got a few resources, and I learned as I went along the way. And I kept them, and I am very thankful that I kept them, because he is a blessing. All three of my kids are a blessing.
Do you have contact with them today?
Yes. I keep in touch with Philip, but not with the girls, because they don't want to leave their dad's family.
So there were 3 children involved,
Yes.
and the father ended up taking the child or the children.
Yes. He came and got them on one of his so-called visitation weekends, which was supposed to be every other weekend from Monday at 5 o'clock till Sunday at 5 o'clock. And that Sunday at 5 o'clock, my kids were not returned, so I gave it some time, thinking, okay, maybe they've run into traffic, or maybe there's been an accident or something. So I gave it a few hours, still nothing. No call, no anything. So I called, and that's when he told me, from now on, if you want to see the kids, you have to find your own way down here to see the kids. And I didn't have any knowledge of how to go about fighting him, because I had never been in trouble with the law. So I got a lot of runaround when I was doing my phone calls, trying to find out how to get help. And by the time I did get a hold of somebody that had a little knowledge to know where to send me to or whatever, my rights were already up.
So you had no recourse. You had no way to
No.
get them. Some of your relationships with abusive men involved escaping from a hospital in a restroom or something.
Yes.
Tell me about that story.
That was a guy that I met in Louisiana, and he was very psychotic. He did not know how to interact with people. He didn't interact with anybody properly. And I kind of saw red flags right away, but for some reason I stayed in that relationship until it almost cost me my life. And one day we were in Texarkana at a hospital, and I saw a security guard, and he claimed that he was going to the restroom. So when I saw the security guard, I said, yes, this is my opportunity. I was saying that to myself, and I flagged the security guard down so I could get his attention before the guy came back from the restroom. And I told the security guard, I said, there is a very serious situation here that I need to get out of. So he pulled me into a private room, and that's when I told him what was going on. And they put me into a safe house. And I don't know what happened to the guy after that, but after I got out of that safe house, I went to several other different states into different safe houses, and just kind of stayed there for like 3 or 4 months and went on to the next state just to throw him off so he wouldn't know where I was. And when I finally got here to Nashville, I was at the Greyhound station. I called the police. I gave them a description of the car and of the guy, and I asked them to please go around the parking lot and around the surrounding areas to make sure that he was nowhere around to find me. And I'm very thankful I got out of that situation, because it could have very much ended my life. Because he has threatened me. He has tried to kill me several times when I was with him. But the Lord was not ready for me yet.
Do you have fear right now
No.
in telling this story that someone may be watching who will do you harm? Hopefully we don't have that big audience.
I really don't think that they would look for something like this program.
Well, thank you very much. In some of your notes here, you say you have I don't know whether to call it a learning disability, but a different way of learning.
Yes, I
Explain
was
that.
qualified with dyslexia, and it has been a big challenge for me learning through my whole life. And when I finally got here to Tennessee, I had 2 teachers that took a lot of time with me when I went to an adult education program. And they pulled me on the side outside of class, because I went to them after my first class with them. And I said, look, I have a hard time learning like normal people. And I said, I need extra help. And they took extra time outside of their busy schedules to take with me and teach me on the side and teach me at a slower pace. And they twisted things around until they finally realized that I got the concept of what was trying to be taught. And they got me tested through the program. And That's when I got diagnosed with dyslexia, and that gave me extended testing time on the GED test, and that's when I finally passed.
Got your GED.
And
Very
it's
good.
not that I didn't know the information, it's just I needed that little extra time.
And is it easier for you to learn by being shown something than
Yes.
to read it? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
You can't just throw something on a board or throw a book at me and say, here, learn, because I don't learn that way.
Gotcha.
I'm more of a hands-on.
You ready for some questions?
Yes.
While we're soliciting some of those, tell me a little more about the ladies' class and what that has meant to you in coming to this church here at Madison.
Well, the ladies' class here has been so awesome for me. These ladies have looked out for me in a way that my own blood family would not look out for me. They have been there for me from day one. They didn't know me from anybody. You know, I just walked in one day and they accepted me right away, and they have been there for me 100% of the way. They have helped me with a lot of my healing, just from giving me the love and the affection and the attention that I never got in life. So to get it from perfect strangers spoke volumes to me, and that helped me so much with healing.
So this is a kind of a judgment-free zone
Yes.
to come here from what you've experienced in the past.
Yes.
Okay, does have a question or comment?
Mary, I just want to say I'm so proud of you, and just getting to know you over the last 3 or 4 years has just been a real privilege in my life. And I'm wondering if you've been able to share your faith with your children, and
Yes.
what has that experience been like for you?
I have opened up a little bit to my children. My youngest daughter claims that she's an atheist, which I am not proud of. My kids still remember me dragging them to church when they were little.
I appreciate Larry inviting you. I appreciate how he's kind of worked patiently with you on drawing you out. But I agree, it takes a lot of courage to be this honest, to be that vulnerable in front of a large group of people. And I hope a part of the reason you feel safe enough is because you know a lot of us do love you. We're very grateful that you're here. You've been a blessing. I did want to know, are there some specific individuals that you want to mention who played an important role in encouraging you or helping you to get stronger?
Everybody in this church has been a blessing to me, but 3 ladies mainly have been the start of it all, and that's Billy, Melna, and Joanne. Those 3 ladies have been tremendously a blessing to me, along with everybody else.
Your involvement with the church here includes working with the Benevolent Center, is that correct?
When I'm able to.
Okay. Are you able to relate to them better than maybe even I could if I was up there?
When we were open to the public coming in the building, I was able to relate to some of the females that came in asking for clothing. I even took it upon myself to approach a few of them that I saw were in abusive relationships and pulled them on the side and just kind of nudged them a little bit and gave them some resources that I was given throughout the years. But now that we are closed, it's not the same anymore. We're not closed, but we're not open to the public coming in the building anymore.
Mary has been a big asset in the domestic violence support group that we have in the area. She has been part of it, and she's been very helpful to all the different ladies that come in, very outspoken, and we appreciate her.
You've been helpful. That's good.
I just want to ask her to tell the audience how she actually came to church here.
My first encounter at this church was when I was shopping at Walmart across the street. I had passed this church so many times, and I didn't grow up in the Church of Christ. I grew up non-denominational. So I didn't really know what a Church of Christ was. But that day when I was shopping across the street at Walmart, something kept on telling me in my head, you haven't tried that church, you haven't tried that church, and it wouldn't let me go. It just stayed in my head. So I said, okay, Lord. So I took it as a sign from the Lord. And when I got to my place where I was staying at the time, I Googled it on the internet, time of services, and I was here that very next day. And I got accepted from day one of walking in these doors, which I had never received from a church ever. I've never got the acceptance that I got when I walked in these doors. And I've been in many churches. And in my first encounter with Miss Billy, she would see me all the time at Kroger's, where is my workplace. And she'd come in there all the time and try her best to get me to open up to her. And I just refused to open up to her because I had that barrier up where I didn't want to let too many people into my world. Well, when I walked in this church, for the first time, Miss Billy saw me. She stopped me and she said, "You're my little Kroger girl." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And from that very day, because of the fact that I knew she was in church, that just opened the doors for me to communicate with her.
And you work today also. I got off an hour before you came in here. We appreciate that. Appreciate that. Your father died at a very early age.
32.
Tell me that story.
He died when I was living with my mother in a little town in Illinois, and I'll never forget, we got a phone call from my Uncle Mike, which was one of my dad's brothers that he did not get along with. But of all the uncles, he was the one that called at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I heard my mother pick up the phone because for some reason I was still awake in my room. I was in the bed, but I was awake. And I remember my mother coming in the room and she said, "I got some bad news for you." And I said, "What?" She said, "Your dad's passed." And I said, "No, you're lying." And she came to me before she went to my brother because my dad didn't really have a relationship with my brother. Me and my dad had a special relationship, and I was the closest out of all of his kids. I was the one that got most of his attention. I was the one that he paid the most attention to. I'm not saying that that was a good thing on his part, but for me it was a good thing.
Right.
And I saw a different side of my dad than what others did. And I kind of gave my dad a lot of slack.
What has been the one thing that has helped you in trusting men now, or do you trust men now?
I trust men a lot more now than I did when I first started with this church because of the fact that the men that I have gotten to know have been through a lot of the ladies at church, and they're married to them. And a lot of these men have not done anything to justify wrong behavior. They've always been nice and polite. Now, when I first started at this church, I was very hesitant to even shake a man's hand because of what I had been through. But that has changed. But I still don't let outsiders come into my world that easy.
Are you able to give advice to other women who have been
Yes.
abused? What do you say to them?
There was an incident maybe 3 or 4 months ago where for some reason I had a voice in my head, go to Madison Family Restaurant. And for some reason it didn't let up. So I was being obedient and I went into Madison Family Restaurant. And here comes this lady. As soon as I sat down, this lady comes in the door with bruises all over herself. And I said, okay, Lord, I got it. And so when the waitress came around, I said, ask that lady over there what she wants to eat and what she wants to drink, and I'll pay for it. So she did, and I paid for it. So I gave her a few minutes, just to kind of settle down and everything. And she looked at me at where I was, and she started crying, and she said, thank you. And so I got up, and I went to where she was sitting, and I said, do you mind if I sit with you? And she said, no, I don't mind. And that's when I had asked her, I said, have you been abused? And she said, yes. And I said, hon, I want to let you know that you're a beautiful young lady and no woman deserves to be hit on. Because I said, I've been there, I've done that. I know what it feels like. And I said, do you want to pray with me? And she said, yes. So I sat there and I prayed with her. I gave her some resources that I had. And she said, why are you doing this? And I said, hon, there ain't no reason for me doing this. I said, this is the Lord's doing. And I gave her a few dollars. She said, you don't have to do this. I said, no, I don't have to, but I want to. I said, if you need anything, I work right over there across the street. I said, if you need anything, please contact me. And I never heard from her again, never saw her again. But I hope just from that little small encounter that I was able to reach out to her in some kind of way.
That's great. You were a blessing in her life, for sure. Is the future bright?
I don't really know what my future holds, but...
You know who holds the future?
Yes, that is true. And I'm hoping that through my years of healing from being a part of this church and stuff, that I can eventually reach out to other females and start making a bigger difference to reach out to other victims of domestic violence and let them know that it's not the end of the world. There are people out there that do care, and all you have to do is reach out. And if you want to get educated, there's all kinds of agencies, there's all kinds of resources to get. And I'm just hoping that I can make a difference and a bigger impact one day to other victims.
Well, you have, and you have tonight, and you will, I'm sure. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Thank you so much. Well, your story is difficult. Your story is difficult to hear. I'd like to close with a reading of Psalms 34, 17 through 18. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. I believe the Lord has heard your cry. And the theme of this talk tonight, this interview, is brokenness, but not forgotten. And you definitely have not been forgotten. Thank you again for being with us tonight. If you have a story of amazing grace, take time to share it with someone this week. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Stories of Amazing Grace. Thank you.